I cannot get the best value out of my AI because the data isn't talking to each other.
And that's going to really evolve how we actually even Google search.
Future is already here, but it's not evenly distributed.
Let's get started.
Hi folks, and welcome back to another episode of Grey Matter and Code. I'm your host, and today I'm genuinely excited because we've got someone incredibly special joining us. We're thrilled to welcome Rishan Lye, National Consulting Leader at BDO Canada. Rishan leads the BDO Management's technology and consulting practice and also serves on the BDO Canada's senior leadership team. With over 2 decades at the firm, he's been at the forefront of major enterprise programs spanning banking, government, and financial services on a global scale. Rishan, it's an honor to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ashwin. It's an honor to be here.
So let's start at the top. You've been with BDO for over 20 years now. So
Right.
That's a career that spanned transformation, technology, leadership. And for those in our audience who might not be as familiar, can you walk us through what BDO Canada actually does and what your role looks like?
Yeah, so BDO Canada is part of a global network, BDO, where we're in 160 countries. In Canada, we're one of the largest professional services firms and really driving impact, positive impact and value for Canadian businesses. So everything from advising them on accounting, audit, assurance, tax, to financial advisory services, risk advisory services, and then the group that I lead, which is the technology services group, where we're really helping drive technology transformation for Canadian businesses.
Perfect. Now let's get into the core of today's conversation, the
Sure.
productivity paradox.
Yeah.
To ground us, could you please explain what productivity paradox really means, and especially in the Canadian context?
Yeah, so the productivity paradox, which is something that we're really driving a lot of analysis around and helping businesses push through, it's really the notion that despite all of the investment in technology, the advancements in technology, all the great academic institutions that are centered around innovation that we have in the country, like York University, Canada still lags when it comes to having that technology create improvements in the way that we work, improvements in our productivity and our overall gross domestic product, which our GDP lags behind the G20. So that's the inherent paradox, right? We have all of this innovation, all of this investment in academic institutions that help advance innovation, but we still lag behind.
There's a quote that I love from the economist Robert Solow back in 1987, and he said that you can see the computer age everywhere, but in the productivity statistics.
Yeah.
At the time, it was about the US economy, but do you think it still rings true for Canada today?
Oh, 100%. I think it rings true for Canada. In fact, I believe it rings more true for Canada than it does for the US. I think the US has navigated their innovation and productivity paradox fairly well. I think they still have some challenges, but when you look at the advancements of some big organizations like Microsoft and NVIDIA and others, they're really bending the curve of their innovation, where we still lag behind.
Right, and it's fascinating because we're investing similarly, right, as the US, but we're still lagging behind. Why do you think this gap is so persistent?
I think when you look at it from a macro perspective, I think you can see that we may be investing proportionally, but I think access to that capital becomes an issue within Canada. I think there are still aspects of corporations and enterprises in Canada that are much more risk averse than their counterparts in the US. I think there are issues with the way that we perhaps measure productivity and productivity gains. We measure them based on pure KPIs when we should be looking at outcomes. I think there's a lot of different factors, but I believe generally we are slower to adopt technology innovation than our counterparts in the G20.
Okay, so it's fascinating because we've talked about productivity, and I just wanted to understand what are the key indicators that we use in Canada, and what do you think they're telling us right now?
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes that we make is we measure productivity based on just pure hours saved per person, right? And I think what we need to do is pivot that definition more to back to an outcome-based notion of productivity gains. How are we adopting? How are we making quicker decisions as we adopt technology? There's a quote that I read once that said, your ability to grow your business fast is really predicated on the ability to make high quality decisions quicker. And I think that's one way that we could improve the way that we measure productivity gains. Are we able to utilize technology and innovation to make higher quality decisions more quickly?
I see. And digging a little deeper into this, in your view, what structural or systematic barriers in Canada are really driving this paradox?
I think there's the access to capital, I think, is a real issue. I think there are barriers in terms of how organizations deploy technology and focus on just the technology deployment and don't really focus on the adoption of that technology. So I think there's a big change management and adoption focus that needs to happen. We've done a number of large-scale technology projects around the world with my group, and I would say that we focus most of our attention on the adoption of that technology, not the actual delivery of that technology or innovation.
So is it about failing to adopt the right technology, or is it about we're adopting it without effectively integrating into our daily business operations?
I think it's the latter. I think we're not integrating it into our day-to-day. I think we think the completion of the technology adoption finishes when the technology goes live or goes into production. But there's a lot of work that goes into the change management, organizational change management, the adoption cycles, the training and retraining that really is impactful to how successful that technology adoption will be.
Right. And what about the workforce? Is there a disconnect between the tools the businesses are using and the skills that workers have to use those tools effectively?
Ashwin, I think 100%. I think we don't focus on how effective our people are in utilizing the technology that we deploy. So I think there is training and having an open mind into how the implementation of a new technology or innovation can impact a change in business process. So there's a degree of business process reengineering that we have to take into consideration, as well as all the training and adoption that we need to really focus in on.
Right. And from training, what you mentioned, I thought about measuring this kind of productivity, right? Mm-hmm. And here's something that I've always wondered. Do you think the way we currently measure productivity is outdated, especially in the digital or knowledge-based economies?
100%. I think we are still measuring productivity based on how many hours am I going to save based on the implementation of this new technology. But we fail to look at the qualitative aspect of the new technology. Like, are we making better decisions? Are we making quicker decisions? Are we integrating groups of individuals in our organization more efficiently? So I don't think we're measuring that aspect of technology adoption. I think we're focused still on more traditional measures of just trying to improve, 1 hour of time or 10 minutes of time, which is really a way of looking things that dates back to the industrial age, right? And the implementation of factories and factory workers and assembly lines, where every single second saved, every single minute saved could create tremendous improvement in business performance. But today, in the knowledge worker age, I think there's different ways that we need to be measuring it based on output, based on outcomes, based on quality of outcomes and decisions that are being made.
Right. And organizations like Statistics Canada and OECD track productivity trends globally. How do you think we're faring according to that data? Are we getting worse, or do you see a glimmer of hope?
Yeah, so I do see hope. So I don't want this to be all doom and gloom, but we are tracking far behind other nations, right? No matter how you measure it, whether it's the G20 or the G7, we are tracking pretty much at the bottom of that group. I think in the G7 we are lagging, and I think the projection is that in the next 40 years that we would be dead last in improvement in GDP, which is a national way of measuring productivity, and gross domestic product, of course. But we would rank dead last in the next 40 years if we continue our trend. So we really need to curve that growth in productivity, the growth in adoption of technology and innovation if we want to change that outcome.
That does not sound good.
Yeah.
So let's go to the solutions now.
Yeah, for sure.
Why do you think digital transformation hasn't yet translated into the meaningful productivity gains in Canada?
Yeah, Ashwin. So part of the reason is I think there are issues in the way that we are adopting technology, as I mentioned before. I think there's a general risk aversion that organizations have. So when I look at the organizations that I talk to, I think there are many that are in wait and see mode, or they don't have a clear set of goals or outcomes that they're trying to achieve when it comes to the technology adoption. So I think their plan to adopt technology might be a little like one-dimensional. Like, let's just get the technology in there, but they're not measuring it based on, okay, this is what we want to achieve with the technology or the innovation. This is the outcome and the goal that we want to achieve, and then work backwards from there. So I think a little bit is around planning, a little bit is around risk aversion. I think there's definite challenges in terms of convincing the true ROI on technology and innovation. I think there are ways to overcome that. I think that organizations should really focus on quick wins, on not trying to boil the ocean with big technology deployments. I think they need to see success happening in smaller chunks and then build up from there.
That's great. I think I'll take away from this conversation this line that you said, that small chunks result in success. And this moves me to my next question is, what can organizations do to make sure that tech investments actually move the needle instead of just adding more complexity?
Yeah, I think one of the key challenges that organizations need to overcome is that they need to look at redesigning workflows, not just digitizing them, right? So especially when you look at the advent of generative AI and how that's impacted businesses and how they work through their organizational structures. I've talked to a lot of different CIOs of fairly big organizations that say that what they're really trying to focus on is not tacking on AI to existing traditional processes that were designed 20 years ago, but really redesigning those processes from the ground up, right? And so I think there needs to be dedicated time and focus on, let's look at the first principles of what we're trying to achieve in a particular process. It could be looking at the inputs and the outputs and the judgments that are being made. And then what we need to do is redesign them from the ground up with AI as part of the blueprint. So that contrasts an alternative approach that a lot of organizations are taking today, which is take an existing process that was designed 30 years ago and let's just add AI, right? When you do that, you're going to get incremental gains. But when you redesign the process, redesigning it with AI at the core, you can get 10x improvement, right, in the way that functions. I think there also needs to be a focus on people, training people, getting them to adopt AI, and make sure there isn't cultural resistance to new technology, whether it's AI or automation or something else. I think part of that is also focused on organizational change and organizational change management. So I would think that is really the biggest two things that would help an organization achieve more of a 10x growth curve, as opposed to having challenges around just incremental improvements.
Can you explain more about the organization point of view? I can understand that in software development lifecycle, you can add AI agents and that can make productivity better. But from the people perspective, how do you think this can lead to a change?
So I think there's a bit of a paradigm shift that has been published by some big organizations, including Microsoft, who had their frontier firm white paper. BDO also has a point of view on AI in terms of how things will change. But the main thing is that we're moving into an age where we're going from generative AI into what's called agentic AI, right? So AI agents that are capable of doing things autonomously, being trained to make decisions on your behalf, and then effectively can run big processes, right? So if you look at kind of the maturity curve that we've seen organizations take, it's going from being assisted by AI as like a phase one, and the second phase of maturity being you have AI by your side as a colleague. You're working on something perhaps with a team. It could be at school or at work. You send it over to an AI bot. The AI bot works on it, comes back with an answer, and then you integrate that into what you're working on, right? So that's the second level of maturity. Where I think organizations are going to go is the next level of maturity, and this is me paraphrasing the white paper I just described, but it's having agent bosses, and having agentic AI or AI agents running big processes autonomously. So you could be a person within an organization that has a team of 5 to 10 agents. You're going and having those agents work autonomously on a part of your business, and then they're coming back and giving you kind of the outcome of that, right? So that's kind of a maturity curve that could change. Now, how does that change from an organizational change management perspective? It could change the role of HR, human resources, where now instead of just managing human resources, you're managing human resources and agentic AI, and AI agents. And you're managing things such as the agent human ratio. So how many agents should a person on your team have, but for it to be an optimal use of agents? If you have too little, you're not getting the full use. If you have too many agents, you're getting overwhelmed. But there's that sweet spot, right? And I think that's a key organizational change that we might see happening, is the optimal use of agents to accelerate the growth of organizations.
So, to just sum up what you said, I would say that the organizations should try to reach that sweet spot.
Yes.
In order to gain success, that sweet spot is what they should aim for.
They should aim for that sweet spot. It takes oversight and strategy around how you want to deploy AI agents, but it also takes training, right? Because generally, when you start your career, you start as an individual contributor, and then you move up into managing small teams, and then you move up into managing larger teams and maybe departments, right? So the skills in which you learn to delegate and to leverage other folks to help achieve a common goal comes later in your career. With the advent of agentic AI, you could start your career with the ability to have delegates, right? They happen to be AI agents, but you may not have the skills to know how to delegate effectively. So what we're looking at BDO is working with organizations, even with ourselves, as we're customer zero, but looking at training folks right from graduation, right from when they join us, in effective delegation, effective use of multiple people on your team, because you could start your career at BDO with a team of 5 to 10 people that you're managing, right? But they just happen to be AI agents.
Right, and that makes so much sense now that we're in that AI age.
Yeah.
And from a policy perspective, have there been any public programs or government initiatives trying to address that gap? And do you think they're working?
Yeah, so there's one that we are helping organizations utilize, which is called the Scale AI Supercluster. Now, that's a supercluster that's meant to help organizations that are adopting AI and trying to make a difference, trying to create unique utilization of AI, basically scale faster, right? So this is funding that's available. It's available through multiple means of applying and getting that funding, and we, as BDO, help organizations with navigating getting access to that funding.
Right. And aside from the usual more tools, more tech route, what are some practical, maybe even under the radar strategies that you think businesses should really consider?
So some other strategies, let me think. So I think working iteratively is very important. So what we've been advising organizations is that there's a foundation of systems, a foundation of data quality that you need to build in order to make best use of AI, right? And including governance models. So you don't want to just turn it on and just have private information accessible to everyone in your organization. These are governance issues and privacy issues. That's stuff that could take a lot of time to establish and could slow down your whole AI roadmap. So what we're advising is a parallel stream. Start working on the AI foundational items, right? The data quality, the foundational data organization. So that, even though that's the longer term stream, you need to start doing that. But at the same time, in parallel, start working on quick wins, right? Like proofs of concept, POCs. Work on things that are going to generate initial value, things within 2 to 3 months, because that builds the trust and the momentum that AI can make a transformational change in your business, while you're building out the longer term stream that's required to ensure that you have high quality use of information in your organization.
So the secret sauce is clean data.
Yeah, clean data, 100%. But having a fast lane and having the longer lane, right, where you're building the foundation but generating quick wins at the same time.
Right.
So most organizations will look at executing on a single stream. Here, I'm suggesting you actually do two things in parallel.
And that makes so much sense. So, looking to the next decade, are you optimistic or pessimistic about Canada's ability to reverse this productivity stagnation?
I'm very optimistic that we're going to do the right things to really change what we're seeing, because not only BDO's perspective on this, there's been a lot of attention on the productivity paradox in Canada. We do see a difference and a gap that's forming between us and our peer group in the G7. So when I look at the things that the government is doing to introduce more funding mechanisms like Scale AI, Supercluster, and others, I think we're headed in the right path, and we're going to get more and more aggressive as a country when it comes to the utilization of innovation in corporations and businesses in Canada.
And do you think this change can be led by small businesses, SMEs?
Oh yeah, 100%, right? We work at BDO with a lot of small businesses. We work with small businesses, mid-market businesses, and enterprise and super enterprise businesses. So at BDO, we work with the entire gamut. So we get a lot of perspective on what different market segments are working through in terms of their challenges. I think technology today, especially AI, is so accessible that it doesn't matter how big your organization is. I think you can benefit. And the key thing that I think is a competitive advantage for smaller businesses is that they don't have all of the structure that could make adoption of innovation and technology slow. They can actually move very quickly, right? And so we have several startups that we've seen excel in their growth and disrupt whole industries because they were able to be very nimble and agile and adopt technology in order to grow fast. There are startups that we're talking to that are looking at AI as a solution before they even try to hire, right? So before they even hire staff, they're looking at trying to utilize agentic AI and AI automation to fill gaps in the growth of their organization before they go out to the market to hire individuals. So that's very different thinking than you would see at some of the largest organizations in Canada, where that type of thinking takes longer to adopt.
Yeah, that's totally right. And do you think the universities and academic institutions play a role in this? And do you think they can be the puzzle that can fit the entire piece and help Canada evolve into a tech-driven workforce?
Yeah, I think the academic institutions, they play a key role, right? I think part of it is understanding, the theory, but a big part of it is understanding the practical implementation of innovation and technology like AI. And so when an academic institution can marry both, like having the background knowledge on the theory, but also adding the pragmatism, the practicality of understanding how that technology is adopted and implemented, I think that's a key area where academic institutions can help arm the next generation of our workforce, of our future leaders, to understand how those two coincide.
Right. And coming to emerging technologies, do you think any emerging technologies hold the greatest potential to move the productivity needle in Canada? And any risks that we should also consider when we talk about this?
Yeah, the big buzz is AI, right? I think that is the emerging technology, and it's been around for 40 years. When I was in school, I learned about first principles of AI, and now we're in the age of generative AI, and now entering the age of agentic AI. And I think it still holds the absolute greatest promise to be a difference maker, either for our country or for individual businesses or individuals, right? I was just with a project team the other night, and we were working on a project, and we were working with an AI bot as part of the team, and it incredibly accelerated everything that we were able to produce. I was talking to my colleague that we could do everything that AI was doing, and producing. It would have just taken us 5 times longer, right, to produce all the draft tables, the role descriptions, the descriptions of parts of our work breakdown structure that we were trying to do. But with AI, we saved 5 times the amount of time, but we were able to focus more on not the busy work of creating the material and documentation, but we could focus on the design of the solution. We could focus on the creative nature of what we're trying to solve. So it's not that we would be out of work. It's just we get to focus on the things that only we can do, the things that only we're bringing to the table with our experience and our design thinking, right?
And I can probably easily say that we should not be scared of AI, but upskill ourselves and use AI so that it helps us function better and in an efficient manner, right?
Yeah, they're just things that, as folks that are graduating and understanding where they fit into this into the workforce, into the world with AI. I think there's several things that folks can focus on, right? So one is making sure that focus on design, creativity, design thinking. Like that's not going to go away. The second is making sure that there's a focus on, I call it symphony. It was, part of a book called A Whole New Mind by Daniel Pink. He talks about symphony, which is the ability to take patterns from one area and apply it to whole other areas to solve problems, right? So someone who's famous for doing that is Charlie Munger, who was Warren Buffett's right-hand person, right? And he used to read tremendously. Like he'd read, 100 or 200 books a year. And he used to take concepts from evolution and apply it to his investment thesis, right? And so I think that skill is being able to see patterns in one area and apply it to another is another area where, you can add value even in the age of AI. And the third that just comes to mind as just a couple more. So one is the ability to tell stories. So how do you take complex concepts and turn it into a story that someone can understand and do that in real time? That is a skill that I think folks should be focused on because that allows you to communicate in a way that people understand. And the final one that is really something that folks need to focus on as they enter the workforce is really around building relationships. So how do I go and build relationships with people, have empathy, have understanding of what's important to other people, and use that to build really genuine, authentic relationships?
So you mentioned that storytelling is an important aspect in building a career, and I just wanted to ask whether you have any interesting anecdotes from your workplace where storytelling really helped you?
Yeah, Ashwin. So I think there's a lot of organizations asking us about AI and their own journeys, and these are fairly large organizations. And I think what really resonates with them when we're talking to them about their journey on adoption of AI, advancement of AI, like getting more mature in their maturity curve, is when we tell the story of how we did it at BDO. So we call it the customer zero story. So we talk about not just the things that went well, but also the things that didn't go well. Like what are the things that we did that were more experimentation, the things that were trial and error, and what are the things that we did to convince some of the key decision makers in our firm to be more progressive in how we adopt AI. And so when we talk about that story, and that story is several months long and had multiple milestones, it really gives us a sense of trust and authenticity in how we're trying to position AI with our own customers. And I think it's super important when you're telling a story to relate it to something that you've experienced yourself, because it makes you more approachable, right? It makes the problem or the thing that you're describing more real.
That's really interesting. Moving on to the next question, I wanted to ask, the AI scene is rapidly changing. We just saw from the normal AI that we used to see in the last 40 years to the invention of generative AI. And now we're at agentic AI. And this AI scene is changing rapidly. So people are getting intimidated by it. So do you have any advice which can help people adapt to these changes and not become scared of it?
Yeah, so the biggest advice that I have, and it's something that we talk about in the firm, is to be curious, right? So don't feel scared about change or feel scared about things that are new or new technologies or innovation. Be curious, right? Go and try some of this stuff out. So go and play with Perplexity or ChatGPT or some of the AI, other AI platforms that are out there. Go try vibe coding, right? Lovable, and there's a bunch of other ones. And really embrace, the journey of learning the technology and being curious, read about it, see, where it's going, understand how it works. I think that curiosity can really dissipate a lot of the fears that people have.
Right. So BDO acts as a long-term engagement partner for its clients instead of on basing it off on one-off projects.
Yeah.
So how does this strategy help BDO in its success?
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you asked that question, Ashwin, because it's super important for us in BDO that we're building long-term relationships with our customers, right? And so when we're building long-term relationships, it really affects the kinds of decisions we're making with those customers. If it's a long-term partnership, a long-term friendship, business relationship that we're having with a customer, we're thinking about their long-term success. We're looking at where they headed, what's important to them, where they trying to go, and when we do that, we can start to put into perspective, okay, how can something like AI or other technology innovations come in and accelerate their journey, complement their journey? And so when we talk to our customers and we really help to map out where they're going, we talk to them with the perspective of multiple years, 3 years, 5 years, and we help build out those roadmaps with them aligned to their business objectives. And then we're able to bring our own expertise to say, okay, this is how technology or this is how risk and compliance can impact your journey over the next 3 to 5 years. And here are the things that we can do to help advise you, to help accelerate that journey.
And do you think this is also helping in solving the productivity paradox that we've talked about?
I think it does, right? Because when we're talking to organizations, we can see where they're getting adoption and where they're not. And we can really zero in on the thing that's holding up the adoption. Like the productivity paradox is you deploy the technology and you don't see the uptick, you don't see the adoption, you don't see the outcomes. So when we're looking at building the long-term relationships, we can really zero in on the areas where we're expecting to see positive outcome that are not, and then really help work with the customer to work through what's the barrier, right? Is it education? Is it adoption challenges, fear to use new technology? We've seen it all. And so we can really zero in on the root cause of that.
So let's wrap it up with a few rapid fire questions.
Sure.
If you could give me one piece of advice to Canadian policymakers or business leaders on this issue, what would it be?
I think it's to make it even easier for businesses in Canada to access funding or breaks that will help them accelerate their adoption of innovation and technology.
And for the next generation, budding entrepreneurs, recent grads, what advice would you give them as they step into today's economy?
I think just to double down on what I was saying before, I think focus on relationship building and focus on creating solutions and design thinking.
And lastly, are there any books, podcasts, or resources that you would recommend to listeners who want to explore productivity, transformation, or innovation in more depth?
I think the one that I mentioned earlier, I think is a really good one that would really help folks create a mental model of this new world that we're entering. And it's A Whole New Mind by Daniel Pink. I read that maybe 5-6 years ago. He didn't write it with AI in mind. He wrote it more with the idea of offshoring talent overseas. But when I think about that book and I've reread parts of it, it really applies into what we're seeing today with knowledge being commoditized, intelligence and knowledge being commoditized. What are you left with? You're left with the things that we bring to the table, right? Which is relationship building, storytelling, the idea to be able to design and think about patterns across multiple different disciplines.
So, Rishan, thank you so much. This has been a very rich and thoughtful conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking out the time and sharing your insights with us and our listeners. To everyone tuning in, thank you for joining us for the episode of Grey Matter and Code. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next time.